Hi, I'm John from Just Whiskey. If you like today's show, please give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Consider becoming a Patreon with the link in the description below. Thanks so much for the few Patreons that I do have that help support this channel. Much appreciated. And as a Patreon, you have access to exclusive Patreon reviews. And I try to do one or two a month. And remember, folks, it's just whiskey. Today we are going to be talking about and reviewing Clynelish 14 from two different time periods. The one on my right, your left, is a 2024, so a current release. And then the one on my left, your right, is Clynelish 14 from a 2022 bottling. And we're going to nerd out here a little bit, and we're going to get into laser code on the back and what that translates to. And also, too, in the middle here, I combined the same amount of the current year and the 2022 version as in this glass, marrying together, and I'll give you my opinion on that at the very end if I don't forget, which sometimes I do. And if you're wondering why there are two bottles over here to my right, your left, and one is unopened, the bottling code on this goes back to 2020. Now, I reviewed, I believe it was this bottle, although I didn't give the bottle code back then. 3 years ago, I reviewed Clynelish 14. So you can check out that. I'm a little long-winded and drawn out in that, so you have to be some patient because I compare it with a lot of other things. But that was an early on video, and I think I've become a little bit better at moving things along. So the catalyst for me even doing this, and let's just get the cat out of the bag, the elephant out of the room. I've never had a bad experience with Clynelish 14, and I've had some independent bottlings of Clynelish 14, which I reviewed on my Patreon channel. Clynelish independent bottlings, not Clynelish 14, and people like Ralphie have talked about how they've heard some batch variations and maybe how some of their newer bottlings have lost their waxiness. Roy from Aquaviti has talked about, he's a fan of it, but he's also talked about batch variations and feedback that both him and Ralphie separately have heard about some bad batches out there. And there's also a recent channel that I've recommended on the channel before. He does long form format talking. Whisky Uncorked. And a review he did fairly recently, review number 42, he reviewed Clynelish 14, and he was very disappointed in it. So I recommend, just for the yin and yang, check out his review. His bottling code was from 2022, and it's a different bottling code than my 2022, and we're going to get into that as well. But he was very disappointed in his batch or his bottling. He described it as flat soda, tannic, no waxiness, and he acknowledges that his bottle is probably an outlier, but his score from a scale of 1 to 10, he was going to be generous with a 5 score, which means average, but he actually gave it a 4 score, which is below average. And if you listen to his whole review, he kind of felt that maybe that was even being a bit generous. But I don't want to talk out of turn. You watch his video, but that's the general consensus of what he said. And I've also heard, just from read comments from other channels, that some people have experienced batch variations. There's definitely batch variations, but I have not had a bad bottle. And the cool thing is it's from Diageo. It's 46% ABV, No mention of chill filtering or coloring. I've seen Scotch mist in my sample bottle and left out sample glass. So in my opinion, it is not chill filtered. Coloring, I don't know. Although I can say, and you can see probably on the camera, all bottles seem to have the exact same color. So maybe there is some coloring in there. Okay, so bottle codes. We're going to just get that out of the way, and then I'm going to move on to reviewing and comparing these two right here. Most bottles have a laser code that's really hard to read. Usually it's on the bottom back of the bottle, okay, somewhere down here. And you really have to turn it into the light, sometimes put a magnifying glass onto it. So my understanding with these Clynelish bottling codes, so this doesn't apply to every Diageo or whatever. I'm just talking specifically about Clynelish 14 and their bottling codes. It's my understanding on there that they, and what I see here, they start with a letter C, and this 2024, the bottling code, starts with C4022. And my understanding is that first number, the 4, is the number of the year. Okay, so this would be 2024. I guess it could be 2014, but I just bought this recently. I doubt it's 2014. So that would raise a question. You know, do they just keep it in line with that and it duplicates itself every 10 years? I don't know. But anyway, this bottle that I have here, the laser code starts with C4022, which my understanding means 2024, and it's the 22nd day of the year. So this would have been January of 2024. The 2022, my left, your right, the bottling code is C2336. So that would be 2022, and it would be the 336th day of the year. So what's that, November? I'm not, probably November, right? Around there. The bottling code that Whisky Uncorked reviewed on his review number 42, his bottling code was L2250, which would be 2022, and it would be the 250th day. So I'm just guessing, what's that, July maybe, ish, you know. But so his bottle and my bottle are two different ones. And then, you know, the one on my right, all the way, that I haven't opened, which is probably the bottle that I reviewed because I bought 2 or 3 at the time. This is C0262. So the 0, I would assume, would be 2020, and then it would be the 262nd day of the year. So hopefully that makes sense. All right. So I'm going to put this bottle away, which is that last one I gave you, that C0262, I think is the one I reviewed 3 years ago, although I didn't know enough to look at the code back then when I did the review. All right. So we have, which I think is the newest bottling of Clynelish 14 versus an older bottling from 2022. So we are going to get into, I'm going to review the new one. So on the note, and I'll be comparing it too, but it's going to be, review this first and I'll review this second, but there will be some comparisons. So on the nose, on the newest bottle, I'm noticing the nose is much more rich and sweet and deep. It's more of the extrovert on the nose. There's a little bit of vegetal peat, some melon, and if you use your imagination, candle wax, which they talk about in the back of the tube, which I probably will, I'll read that after I talk about this, because it is interesting. So I'm getting some candle wax on the nose and some chalkiness. Palate. It's sweet, but not as sweet as the older one. I'm getting a little more oak spice on the newer one, this one here, the 2024 version. And the fruits are there, the candied fruits are there, but they're a little bit more in the background as compared to the older 22 version. The finish on the new one is medium to a medium plus, but I'll be fair and objective and say medium, with a dryness to it. And on the finish at the very end, if you smell the glass at the end and you let it linger, I'm getting a little bit of tobacco. So Clynelish is very, very, very lightly peated. There's a little bit of smoke in there. I'm guessing the ppms are minimal. By no means would I call this a peated malt. But I think someone trying it for the first time, I'm probably becoming a little bit peat blind, but someone trying it for the very first time would probably experience more of a peat than what's in there. But it's minimal peat. Probably even less than something you'd find on a Highland Park even. But it's there. So I like it a lot. Let me just take a sip of water. And now I'm just going to read the back of the tube, and then I'm going to review the 2022 one that I have. I'm not going to read everything on there, but aged for 14 years in specialty select oak cask and then bottled at a full 46% ABV. This is a light yet firm-bodied maritime single malt, fresh and creamy smooth on the palate. I agree with that. It has a smoky, sea-spicy character and a very pleasing texture, which is highly regarded by malt whiskey connoisseurs. I agree with that. The nose starts with light candle wax, some sugar, and a faint floral fragrance. Adding a little water brings us into focus. The candle wax is now more richly scented, as if when strolling near the beach, you have come across sun-dried flowers among the sand dunes. On the spicy palate, there's a signature oily mustard cress crispiness. I don't know what mustard cress is. Maybe the wild plant, which is underscored by some maritime saltiness and the satisfying drying finish. So I agree with most of that. It's pretty much, non-poetic and to the point. All right. So now we're going to get into the review of the one on my left, your right, the 2022 bottling, bottle code C2336, so 2022 and the 336th day of the year. Put in the comments which month that is. I didn't look at the calendar and do the math. So on the nose, it's a nice nose, but it's a bit thinner and a bit more shy than the nose in the 2024. It's sharper, and I'm picking up the perfume floral notes and a little bit of spearmint on the 2022 version. And there's also some vanilla and caramel that I really wasn't picking up on the new 2024 version. On the palate, those fruits pop as opposed to the 2024, which you had to kind of search for a little bit. But in the 2022, so it's a little more subdued, a little shyer in the nose, but on the palate, that sweet, fruity, candied fruit, it pops. And I think it's a bit more spirity than the newer one. And I think I am getting a little more of the waxiness on the palate even with the 2022 as opposed to the newer one. The finish is relatively the same in both. I'd say they're both medium finishes, although the older one has the dry finish the same as the newer one. But I'm getting more of that saltiness, the brininess on the finish with the older one. So before the show, I combined them both in equal parts. Let me just take a sip of water. So they're both, you can definitely tell they're in the same family. I can definitely tell they're both Clynelish, but they're slightly different, which is, batch variation, right? There was something else I wanted more to say too, but oh yeah. So when this one on my left, you're right, the 22 version, I've had this open for several weeks, whereas the newer one I just opened fairly recently. You can see by the fill levels. So when I opened the 2022, I almost wanted it to be a bad batch. I want to get a bad batch so I can see what some people talk about. But I've been thoroughly enjoying this, and then it was interesting to try the newer one because they are, again, what I've just described, a little different, but they're both very good. So combined, I'm not necessarily sure it's the best of both worlds. I'm not so sure that the sum of its parts make this better. I'm getting both things now. The nose is a little more pronounced. I'm getting more of the spearmint now, though. Spearmint, mint. This is very nice, but I think I'm gonna just keep these separate. Over time, when the fill levels get low, I probably will mix them together. The great thing is I can still find these in my area for $50 for a 14-year-old, 46% single malt. Most places, although I can find it for $50, most places are closer to the $70 range. And comments that I've watched, I think this has creeped up in price depending on where you are to as high as $70, $80, $90. It seems that's the trend. Although I do find it interesting that the 2024, it's a new release, stocking it, and it's still selling for $49.99. So I have backup bottles of this. Clynelish 14 was my whiskey of the year, I think 3 years ago. You can check out my review on that, and then I also talked about it as a whiskey of the year as a separate review. All right. I think I've covered a lot here. I welcome anything in the comments. And these bottling code dates, this is just my understanding with the laser codes, what they translate to. But I don't have 100% proof that that's accurate. But from what I see and from what I've heard, it seems to make sense. So score-wise, they're sister casks or brother casks or brother bottle, batches. I like each one for different reasons, really. The nose is better on the newer one, and the palate, I think, is more of a fruit bomb on the older one. So I think they're both an 8 out of 10, okay? Which is excellent, and I would still recommend, if you can find it for a reasonable price, but comparatively in this global inflationary market, I think if you can find it for around $70 or a little bit less, I think you're doing pretty good. Yeah, really enjoyable. I'm a big fan. And if you ever see any Clynelish, probably like 17 years old and higher, I think the 17-year-old range, 18, 19-year-old is probably like their sweet spot. But it's not very often that they come out. But if I do see one at a reasonable price, I would certainly consider buying another bottle of an independent Clynelish. Hope you enjoyed today's review. There's a lot to digest in here. Give it a thumbs up, like. I welcome any and all your comments. And remember, folks, it's just whiskey. Hats off to you all, and take care.